Hi everyone. Pretty scary being up here, to be honest. But just quickly before I get into the sort of talk content, if everyone could scan that QR code or visit the link, it's just going to be a bit important for later on in my presentation. I'll put the QR code back up later if you miss it right now, but I'll give you maybe about 10 seconds to just get that going. Okay, so that seems to be pretty good. So a quick game before I get into my sort of content, which is, I'd like to play a game of quick associations. So for each word that shows up on the screen, this could be pretty dangerous, I'll be honest. For each word that shows up on the screen, I'd like you all to shout out the first word that comes to mind in relation to each of them. So, first off.
Sweet.
Okay.
Green. Ocean. Blue.
Okay, that last two, those are pretty interesting, but I'll demonstrate the importance of these quick associations in a bit, but first, a little bit about me. So, hi, I'm Anna. I'm currently a second-year cybersecurity student at the University of Warwick. And whilst I am president of our cyber society, I do have interests that aren't just the technical. So I'm here giving a pretty sort of non-technical talk just to talk about one of my big interests outside of cyber, which is art and design. So I really love to draw, and I thought that design is something that's not very often highlighted when it comes to cybersecurity. And it's actually really important. So basically, my job is to hopefully tell you why and raise a bit of that awareness. So, a quick primer on the state of design currently in cybersecurity. So, a research group called Daylight Lab recently created this thing called the Cybersecurity Imagery Dataset, where they got 2 years worth of Google image searches about cybersecurity and collated them into one big data set and analyzed it. And they found that this color scheme, these 5 colors, were the top 5 colors used in all of those images. And 235594 in hex was the color of cybersecurity. So that appeared in almost every single image in that data set. So essentially, blue is used to often symbolize this sort of peaceful kind of digital side of the field. But what's interesting is we have a nice little blob of red here as well. And it raises a few questions because red is designed to highlight a sort of alarming risk or insecurity in a lot of these images. And why are we trying to essentially raise fear in the images that we so often associate with our field? So that's a big question to sort of think about, which I'd like you to all ponder on. Following on from these sort of common color tropes, I'd like to also talk about some other visuals that we tend to get in the design language of cyber. So we have the padlock. This shows up almost everywhere. You may have seen it on the previous slide. Plenty of padlocks, all in all of those images. And whilst it's a great abstraction of the sort of concept of security, it's not really a great abstraction of the concept of cybersecurity. It does raise a few questions as to why we've used a padlock to essentially abstract the digital aspect. And it doesn't really reinvent the wheel when it comes to things. We also have images like this, which have this sort of red versus blue kind of color scheme and a lovely hooded figure. I'd like to think if I was burning down a room, I'd dress more stylishly than that. And speaking of stylish, yeah, we have whatever this shady figure is doing over here. And so these sort of speak for themselves and how strangely associated they are with cyber, when I'd like to think no one in this room is currently in a top hat and a mask. So, but they're commonplace in overuse. And how did this happen? There's one big thing, which is the way the media presents cybersecurity. So there's this sort of air of negativity going out in the world where most of the front page headlines when it comes to cyber is simply all about good versus bad, light versus dark, some evil hackers are trying to destroy the mainframe, whatever that is. If there are any Marvel fans in the room, you might have seen a few of their movie posters. They often use this sort of blue and orange color scheme, which represents this sort of good versus evil trope. And I find that that kind of sort of movie aspect has seeped into the way that we use cybersecurity imagery. And the graphics used by the media are just really similar to these, and they don't show positivity, and they rely on maintaining cyber as this sort of mystical art that no one can really access. So coming back to my QR code, I'd like to showcase the importance of those associations. So if you haven't scanned it already, just quickly take a few seconds to do that. And what I'm going to do is I have found a template online, a lovely little HTML template, which is basically for a typical sort of cybersecurity website. And I've gone, and that template was previously blue, and I've hue adjusted the image to represent a couple of different colors. And on your screen from this website, you will see you have 5 colors, and those represent the 5 colors of the hue adjusted website. And I'd like you to press one that you think represents the most sort of cybersecurity based website, something that makes you feel secure. If you saw that website, you would trust it. And I'm just curious to see what, everyone thinks. So here are those 5. Hold up your phones. Wow. Okay. So we've got some interesting responses here, because not everyone actually picked blue. So I could see a whole variety of colors. And some people in this room might have remembered a few sort of months ago, I actually did a survey in which I asked people to sort of do a similar kind of test with similar colors. And I asked them to actually tell me why they picked that color. And some people actually picked red and yellow. And it's interesting because those people tended to associate red and yellow with passion, health, vitality, those kinds of positive connotations, which actually helped represent to them a sort of secure, healthy kind of website. But again, most people lean towards blue and sort of green and things. And essentially, human color association is actually just heavily individual. It is nothing really to do with how sort of cycles are perpetuated. And actually, the sort of associations that you've each individually formed are based on your own personal experiences. So even though, however, if we put this aside and we take blue to be the sort of stereotypical cyber color, a lot of you also picked green and purple, which are actually analogous colors to blue. So what that essentially means is because they are sort of harmonious on that side of the color wheel, they also represent really sort of healthy kind of connotations with security. But red, orange and yellow are on the completely opposite end of the color wheel. They're known as complementary colors. And as a result, those are meant to symbolize this contrast, this opposition to what the media has sort of chosen to represent. And so why is blue such a constant if we understand that these associations are heavily personal? It's familiarity. So it all comes down to the fact that because this sort of perpetual cycle has ensued of people using blue and not really coming up with any new graphics to reinvent the wheel, the use is just so ubiquitous that no one feels that they can use anything else. That association is so deeply ingrained that no one has tried to see whether individual things can be brought out. In fact, security designs, though, have a very sort of big effect on the public. So currently, the sort of stereotype is very unfriendly, ominous kind of imagery of, hackers in greenlit server rooms, sitting in the dark, not really, doing anything good. And these designs can actually feel very daunting. And I'd like you to all think of design as making a PowerPoint. If the point isn't clear and visible in that design, it will be really difficult for people to sort of understand and digest it. And we need to keep these designs really accessible as well. So we need to ensure that people are actually able to see the content that's within them and to help digest that sort of material. But in fact, the biggest point that I'd like to make is most academics, policymakers, and cyber professionals actually disagree with the current state of cyber graphics. They feel it really misrepresents the field. But they offer no alternatives instead. And that's something interesting to mull over. No one has actually tried to change the current status quo. So in terms of changing that, what can we do? We have 2 big options. So one is to opt for familiarity in design. So we can take the existing sort of design language, but sort of make little tweaks and add spins on it. So currently, with sort of blue elements and things, we don't necessarily need to not use blue at all in any of our designs, but we can use blue and perhaps change the other design elements that surround it. Or we could turn the entire thing on its head. Stop using blue, stop using padlocks, stop using shady hackers in server rooms, and try and create an entirely new design language that we feel represents things better. So in terms of some ideas for option 1, in terms of how you can make your designs more accessible to people, ignore the questionable spelling of fence on this diagram, but it's the only one I could really find that was better than some other ones. You don't have to be the best designer to actually implement clarity. What you do have to use is use great analogies and take out unnecessary acronyms. Make sure your audience knows what they're reading. You can also take previous sort of design elements that have already been used, like the padlock, and add them alongside other design elements to make it more clearer as to what you're trying to represent, instead of just using a padlock on its own. And finally, we need to really change the sort of general imagery that's going around in the media. So these are actually 2 really recent news stories from BBC News, and both of them have actually used that sort of shady hacker in a server room surrounded by binary digits kind of image. But the 2 at the bottom, as you can see, they are taken from real sort of cybersecurity websites, showcasing real people and how they actually work in the field. And those are great images that we should be using more in such like media stories. Take out the negativity and put a more positive spin on it and show how real people and real individuals tend to work here. And then, obviously, for option 2, there are some other ideas. So there's a website called cybervisuals.org, which is this collective that is aiming to sort of turn cyber imagery on its head. And here are some ideas that they have that I think are pretty great. So they have this one, which is designed to represent phishing, and this one, which showcases sort of diversity in the hacking community without really resorting to sort of like too much blue usage. You also have this one, which obviously is a lot more blue in its color scheming, but it is a great way of sort of abstracting technical concepts and representing how real people can sort of understand them. And you have this one, which is a great way of showcasing location tracking without actually putting a massive emphasis on its negative connotations. So, as I said, they don't have an overwhelming focus on blue, and they get these concepts across without resorting to sort of very, very typical graphical stereotypes. So, in terms of the conclusions that we can draw from this in how we can start to make our designs better, design for people, so design with accessibility and sort of widespread information in mind. Change the formula, so take a few aspects of the current sort of blue usage or the current design climate and make it your own. Or just rewrite it completely. Don't follow the wheel, and instead choose to reinvent it. Break stereotypes. Showcase how you're all real people in this room with a hugely diverse set of backgrounds and a hugely diverse set of fields. And showcase how not everything is just hackers in hoodies. And represent new areas. So create abstractions of just other aspects of security that you feel aren't currently represented. I'm sure we've all seen the sort of typical sort of network diagram nodes with crossed wires used to represent security. But security is not just networking, it's more than that. And I think we should start to show that. And finally, always understand association. So I hope that this talk has sort of armed you with the power to understand the importance of color in design, and whether it's for a personal project, an internal company view, or even a public-facing website, things like design should really just not be taken lightly, and associations really matter. So if you take things slow and tweak your design language and learn from others, you'll be armed with the tools to start to take steps in your design journey and make design more accessible for everyone. And yeah, thank you. If you have any questions.
Thank you for your talk. I'm really happy that someone's actually taking a look at trying to change the messaging around cybersecurity awareness and identification of it. I can't tell you the number of times I've seen wrench displayed as an image for ransomware, and it's really annoying me. What are you hoping to do with this in terms of future work and raising awareness about this issue?
So currently I'm sort of researching into how to sort of make a framework to make things like this more widely accessible. So create a set of guidelines and rules that people can actually follow to essentially take the principles that I've said in this and make it more widespread, because I find it's just not really talked about in terms of a design context specifically.
Any more questions? Then thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.